I think a lot of you know me, probably most of you. I'm Kevin Lavadier. I am the senior surveyor for survey operations in geometronics. I've been working with ORD now for a year and a half, going on 2 years. And I think last week I finally started to get it. So don't worry, it's not that bad. But we do want to share some of the stuff we've come up with. And today I'm going to be taking over from John just for a few. We'll give you something a little different. He's been doing the mapping workflow. And today I'm going to go over the confidence point tool. I'm going to do a little bit of cleanup, or I should say review, on the ODOT survey ribbon. And I called it Lite because I'm not going to get into it. I think when John does some more on the mapping topic, he'll definitely get into the ODOT survey ribbon a little bit heavier. And then hopefully with time allowing, we will also do geometry alignment basics. And we will continue on. The plan right now is next week, we will continue on with some of the geometry and alignment tools, with the idea that you guys are probably getting to the point where you need to start developing some right-of-way base maps and developing retracements, recoveries. So we'll mix a little bit of that in with the mapping tools, so you start to have some help in that area also. I hope everybody's had a chance to work a little bit with the ODOT survey ribbon. And when we say the ODOT survey ribbon, how does it work? What is it doing? Now, the ODOT ribbons are a conversion from the old task menu that was in our V8i workspace. With a lot of effort, we've made some improvements to the one in survey to hopefully streamline some of the ways that we had been using it. But the biggest thing is the ribbon. When you choose a tool from the ribbon, and in this case, I've chosen asphalt edge, so I want to draw an edge of asphalt in my drawing. It sets the active template. And what's important with that is the active template not only sets the level and all the other attributes for the element you're going to draw, but the active template is what ORD uses to associate that element to a feature definition when we do the import process. And so these mapping categories, roadway, traffic, terrain, bridge, railroad, geo, vegetation and landscape, utility and hydro, every one of the commands in there is going to generate an element that ORD can then import from graphics back into the survey field book. Now, how is the SeedTopoDOT.dgn different than that? Well, here's just a clip of the levels that are in the SeedTopoDOT.dgn. Notice those are not standard ODOT levels. Those are not the E roadway level that we just saw. They are our field codes. And those levels are important because if you're going to export the features using the TopoDOT tool, you do not want to use the ribbon. The ribbon will put stuff on the standard levels, but what TopoDOT needs is TopoDOT actually needs it to be on the field code levels. Because what that export process does is it reads the field code level and sets the point property to be a field code, and then we get an ASCII text file that's going to come back into our field book. We're going to import it into our field book exactly like the field survey data is. So one way to think about it, and I don't like to go backwards, I like us to think going forwards with this new tool. But one way to think about it is, the features that we draft in the DGN using the ribbon, they are more like what we did with the workflow for V8I and SS2, where the graphics were directly imported into the DTM. But in this case, in ORD, we want all of those features to be in the survey field book because we are going to generate the terrain from the survey field book. So to demonstrate this, and
Kevin, can I make a comment on that?
Sure, go for it, John.
Loading. So there's 2 YouTube videos that are on the Engineering Automation YouTube channel that describe these 2 different processes of using the ODOT survey ribbon and using the TopoDOT method. So for more information on this, you can see those. So
thanks, John. So the reason I bring this up today is we have had a couple of questions about, how do we put these drawings together? How do we put these products together? And it can be a little daunting at first. So this drawing I made using the TopoDOT seed. So if you look, let's bring this out, unpin it for a second. Now it won't hide on me. You can see all of our field code levels are in there, but also all of the ODOT standards levels are in here. And the reason for this is the TopoDOT seed is a special file designed just for our work in TopoDOT. And we have placed the field code levels in that DGN seed. The rest of our ODOT levels are coming from our standard workspace. So you will always see them because they're always going to come in from the workspace libraries. So even though you're in TopoDOT, you have the choice to use whatever levels, whatever methods are necessary. But the proper choice is using the field code levels. And if I bring up my properties dialog, we can see here we have a fence line. Its level is FNB. Edge of pavement, EP, so on and so forth. Curb line. So those 3 lines look exactly like, or 4 lines, sorry, I can't count today. Those 4 lines look exactly like these 4 lines. But the difference here is these have been drawn using the survey ribbon. So that is still a fence, but it's based on a template. And if I were to import from graphics, these 4 lines would get the right association, they'd have the right feature definition, and they would import into our survey data field book. The 4 lines from TopoDOT need to be exported using the TopoDOT tools. So if you're going to import stuff graphically, use the survey ribbon. If you're going to use TopoDOT's process, then use the field code levels that are in the TopoDOT seed. Any questions on that? Okay, so let's get into the real meat of today's topic, the confidence point tool. So with the change to ORD and Connect, our current or our prior confidence point workflow did not work with the new ORD tool set. So we've had to come up with some new tools, and the biggest part of this new tool is it's external, it's an exe file that was developed by David Mole in Geometronics for us, and it processes some files and creates the confidence point reports and the data that we're used to. The shortcuts for all of this can be found in your desktop folder. I'll show you that in a second. Engineering survey, we have a new survey folder in there. And I'll warn you right now, the process will simplify once our version of ORD is upgraded. They have made improvements to the tool in ORD that we'll be using, and we will be able to generate the reports directly from ORD without using the external exe file. But we have to get to the point where we've got everything set up before that upgrade can happen. So before I demo it, just kind of want to give you the basic gist, and that is we're going to create 2 XML files in ORD. One of them is a list of your confidence points, and then the second one is the terrain elevation check data, and that's going to come from a tool in ORD. The next step is we're going to take those 2 files and we're going to process them with the external tool, and that's going to create 2 output files. The output files are confidence point processed text file and an ODOT surface check PDF report. And then the final step is we will take the confidence point processed file and import it into a new field book in your terrain.dgn. And that will generate all the processed graphics like we've used in the past in En-ROADS. I said all of this can be found in your engineering folder. So if you notice, open engineering, open survey, there's your confidence point tool, shortcut to the exe file. Now, currently yours probably says version 2.3. We've made a small edit, and that'll need to be updated, but that'll happen in the next day or two, and it'll happen without you noticing. It's something that we can push in the background with the startup files. You have 2 shortcuts, one for an input folder and one for the output folder. And then you'll have a link to the document. This is the workflow documentation. I need to finish it up so we can copy it there, but once it's done, it'll have those 3 main sections that we talked about, and it'll have step-by-step process with screen grabs of everything you're going through. So let's open a file and let's start this process. There we go. Now we're ready. I'm going to keep my notes up here on the other screen so that I don't miss a step. So, couple of things. What you need, and you see we have it here. We have a terrain working file. So you have to have your DGN that has your terrain in it. and you need to have confidence points. Those confidence points can be in the field book that contains all the mapping data, or they could be in their own field book. Either one is acceptable. But I notice here I have graded, natural, rugged, and surfaced. So we've opened our drawing. I need to change my menu to survey. We're going to go to field book, and I'm going to open my details, which of course comes up on the other screen. So remember, whenever you open the details up for the first time, you always want to start by selecting all points features. That resets ORD's brain. Now, I'm going to select my first code that is a confidence point. I'm going to hold down the control key, and I'm going to select the other three codes. Now, notice in the survey point details, I'm listing only confidence point data. And I've got 495 confidence points in this file. I'm going to data point in the upper left corner, and that's going to select everything that's shown in the survey details dialog. So we need to create two XML files. We're going to start creating the point list first. So we're going to right click, navigate to export selected items, land XML format. Now, if I go to my desktop, engineering, survey, I can go put my file in the input folder. Now, what we'll want to do is keep, or I should say, the ending of the name for the file should be PTS list. Doesn't have to be, but that way it helps keep these two files straight. And the beginning of these names should be your project name or your project key number. In this case, we'll do K20485. And then the second part of the name I like is a key to the terrain name. In this case, let's just call it original ground. Save. Now I've built my first XML file. Now the next thing we need to do is create a selection set for running the tool with. So I'm going to right click in this left bar again, and I'm going to say selection, create selection set. We're going to hope that ORD doesn't crash. And now you can see that great sea of orange with all those 495 points is part of my selection. And one thing that I always suggest is you get a count of how many points you have in the survey details. And then you want to come down and count how many objects to make sure that those two match. That's your selection set in ORD. Just going to move that off to the side so it's a little easier to have some screen real estate. Now you want to navigate to the Terrain tab. In the Analysis toolbox, use the down arrow on points and go to Analyze Elevation. Now we're going to follow the screen prompts. And this one, if your terrain is not visible or basically displayed on screen, then you can always go turn it back on. But any part of the terrain will do, whether it's the perimeter, whether it's a triangle, or I can even touch a contour that's displayed. Any part that ORD builds with that terrain works for selecting it. So I'll just select this triangle. Now it's asking me, data point to use selected elements. Yes. And the final input is your tolerance value. This is not critical because the tool is going to set the tolerance values when it analyzes the data. So here, a value of 1/10 works fine. I'll just accept it. And now we have the Civil Report browser. This is an output, but it's not an output that we want. So we need to save the data that's been generated in raw XML format. So on the left-hand list, this is all of your style sheets or report styles, and you can select the raw XML style, go to File, Save As, and because the last file I did a save as was already in the input folder, this file is also in the input folder. Now if I look, so there's my K2485. So I'm going to name it the same start 2485. I'm going to name it Original Ground. And the suggested name is Terrain Check. We're going to make sure that it's XML data because you can save text out of this and it won't do us any good. We need the XML data, and I'm going to hit save. And now we've completed the first section. We're going to close the report browser. I'm going to zoom out and I'm going to data point just somewhere in the black to clear my selection set. And now we're going to switch to the external tool. So I'm going to minimize ORD. Going to go back to the engineering survey folder. And in the instructions, there are a couple of caution points here. And that is, you do not want any Word documents open and running. When you run the executable code for this tool, it will close all active Word documents that are on your desktop at the time. So I double click the shortcut. You're going to see the old-fashioned DOS shell screen. And you're going to think, man, this thing is frozen. It's not doing anything. Just be patient. The way we had to write this, it's a little slow. It has to load some libraries, but you notice right before it was ready to go, it puts the text on the screen, please wait. A little late, I already was waiting, but it gets us there. So now the first file it asked for is your point list. Okay, so I find my 2485 points list. I say open. It says now I want your terrain check. Okay, I find my 2485 terrain check. I say open. And then it says, where do you want to output this? And it's going to default to the output folder for the tool. That's the easiest place. You just have to hit select folder. You're going to see a little progress bar. And it's done. So we're going to use our shortcut to the output folder. And to make this easy, I always sort this folder by modified date, because then the most recent stuff is either going to be at the top or the bottom. And these are the two files that were generated by the tool. These files are always going to be named the same thing. So you either want to add a prefix to them or move them and add a prefix to them, because the next time you run the tool, it will overwrite those files. Remember I said one of the files was an ASCII point file, plain and simple. The confidence points, they now have a new processed code. They have some attribute data that's going to help us. And it's just a process, just a ASCII code file of the results. And then the other one is our PDF report. The PDF report gives you critical information, what time it was run, what the two input files were, and then it's going to give you the statistical run like we've always had in the past. It's going to tell us what our failures were, what our percentages are, and then it's going to have a detailed listing of all the points. And at the very last, if I can get down there, it has some good information, which are, these are all of your points that fall outside of the DTM. And then hopefully you don't have any points that show either with mismatched coordinates or invalid codes. If you do have points that show up in these lists, then that means something's been cross-wired and you need to go check your data files. So what I'm going to do is, because this is now project data, it's part of our work towards this final project, we want to save it. We don't want to leave it in this working output folder. I have either a folder on the server or a folder on my F drive or whatever the case may be, and I'm going to move those files, or at least copy them, to this new folder. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to add 485 original ground. I'm going to add the same prefix that I was using on the input files. That way we can easily match these up when we go to look at all of the confidence points. Because remember, confidence points is not a one-time thing. As you can see, we had some failures in there. We had some 3 times failures. We can't have those. So now I've got my 2 files. We're completely done with the second part. And now we're moving on to the third and final part, which was we need to import this back into our ORD drawing. So I'm going to bring my ORD back up. I'm going to go over here and I'm just going to collapse the actual terrain data, the OG data. Because these points are processed now, we don't want to put them back into the original data. And not only that, they have the same point numbers as the original shots do, which in a field book can't happen. You can only use a point number once. So I'm going to go to create a new field book. I'm going to follow the on-screen prompts, and I'm going to name it confidence point processed. So now I have my new field book, and now we're going to import that data file. We're going to want to use the text wizard so that we can select a text wizard template. It's going to ask me to locate my field book, and then it's going to ask me to locate my data file. So there's my text data file. I say open. I'm going to expand this just a little bit so they don't wrap. And you can see there's our data file. Now you need to select the open button, and you'll select your TIW, which is your text import wizard. And you want to select the conf point process import. Open. And to complete the import, you just select finish. And it's going to ask you, do you want to save this in your import settings? So we're going to say no there. So this is a good reminder. The first time you bring any sort of new data file into a DGN, it always seems to take a little longer. And that's because it's loading the right feature definitions, it's loading the right cells. Even though this should be pretty simple data, it's obviously chugging through it. So what we'll find is the next time we do it, it should go a lot faster. So now what we can see is we have our processed confidence points as a data file in that field book. And we have all of our point codes. Now you may ask, why are there basically raw point codes in with our passing, failing, 3 times failing point codes? And that's because every point that falls off of the surface is just going to come back into this processed file as a raw confidence point. I need to do one thing to make this a little easier to visualize. And that is, I need to turn the originals off so you don't get distorted. And now let's just turn off the terrain for a minute. And now we can see the process symbols have come in. So remember, white is passing. Hexagon is graded. Pentagon is natural. Circles are surfaced. And notice every point has the point ID, the number, and then it has the delta. So this is a real quick way we can go see, there, that failure is 0.83 and it's natural. So that's something we'd want to investigate. So now that we've got the graphics in the drawing, what we really want to do is go investigate these 3 times failures. You've got a 9 and a 2. We can find them in here, and we could go look for 51, 427, natural 3 times failure. Or we could just turn off all the other graphics and just go look for the red ones. Well, that's a problem right there. That was shot as a surfaced point. So why is that a surfaced point? You know, I've got edge asphalt over here. I've got some brake lines. Would you call that graded or natural? So if I select the original, I can go back into our raw data file or our original data file. And let's just call this natural. I think it's still going to have a problem because it's a foot 45 off. So there's probably something else we need to look at there. But we can do that for the time being. Got a problem there. So here's another surfaced one. Let's call it graded. You know, it's right on the edge of gravel there. And then we've got, wow, these things are 9 feet off, 17 feet off, 22 feet off. Why are they so far off? Do you think maybe they're on the bridge deck? So let's go make a selection set out of them. I can get my details. And if I right click over here, I can say selection, select from selection set. Oh, it lost my selection set. Why did it do that?
Because you hit all point details, all point features.
Oh, did it reset it? Yeah.
It resets it.
So now I've got my 4 points. I can right click on this and I can say export selected items to a Bentley survey file. And I'm going to say 2485. Deck CPS. Because these shouldn't be in the OG file, they should be in the deck file. And now that I've exported them, I can delete them from this file. And since we're close on time, we're going to rerun this process real quick. Going to export a second set of files. And I'm going to call it O2. Because remember, it's an iterative process. So I want to keep the ones I had before, but I want to make a new set. Create selection set. Points. Analyze elevation. Oh, and I did it. I don't have my terrain turned on. You see the boundary, but that's actually the element. That's the simple graphics. It's the boundary. So what I need to do is turn my terrain back on. Now I can select it. Data point, tolerance, sure. Close that, clear the selection set. We'll run the tool real quick again. So I want my point list file. I'm going to select the number 2 version. Terrain check file. Output folder. There, it finally came up. I'm going to pull this one off to its own version for a second, just so we can have a little side by side here. So you can see we had 9 failures, or 3 times failures. Now we only have 3. Didn't do anything for the naturals, but you see how you can work through those. That was a weird accent there. And then because they're all still the same point number, you would either need to delete this data file and re-import it with the second data file, or you could create a whole nother field book, turn the first field book off. Now you don't have any of those graphics that were generated, and you would import the second set of data into a new field book. We did not get to the geometry basics. We have 3 minutes left, so I will open it to questions. I just kind of put a little summary synopsis in here, basically the level stuff I started with. The real question is, to use or not to use. And it depends on how you're mapping your cloud data. And then the confidence point tool. Yes, Lenny.
I wondered if you could go back to the slide where you were talking about the ribbon tools, where you had a red box drawn around something. Yeah, it's this one here.
Oops.
One more step.
There it is.
Right there. I just wanted to make a point that your red box is drawn around the level, not around the element template name. So that might be confusing.
That's actually around the element template name.
No, that's the level.
No, it's not.
Roadway Edge ASFE is a level name. So I just wanted to point out, if you were talking about the element template, you might want to move that box, or yeah.
No, the element level is E serve boundary right away. That is weird.
So that is the template, roadway edge asphalt E. Okay.
Yeah.
I just wanted to make sure that we were talking about the same thing, because the names are similar.
Yes, they are.
E's in a different location. Okay.
And yeah, and that's because.
Oh, you're right.
Actually, this is a very good point that Liddy has intentionally brought up to help you guys understand this. This attributes box is slightly different because it's the one that comes with the ODOT ribbon. If we go look at one of the Bentley ribbons, notice that the right-hand box is the level and the left-hand box is your template.
Thank you for pointing that out. I did not realize that.
Yeah. Now, when you use the ODOT survey ribbon and we select one of these, I'll do edge of asphalt again. Notice it sets everything. And also what you get is your little blue icon. That is your template association. That is very critical. If you do not have that turned on, then even though you have a template set here, the element that you draw is not going to have that ingrained in its data, in its essence inside the drawing. And the other thing that you don't, I won't say you can't do, but you don't want to do, and that is get down in here and start trying to drill through and say, oh, well, I want to draw a driveway, so I'm going to set my template to EU roadway drive. No, pick it from the ribbon. Trying to drill through these templates is a nightmare because there are so many of them. Everything that we do in Connect has some sort of an associated template with it, whether that is drawing survey graphics for mapping or whether that is drawing labels for the annotation or, you know, annotating plan sheets, point features. There's so many of these things. It's a nightmare to navigate. So don't use this button to look at. Don't use this button to choose. You'll drive yourself nutty. John.
Thanks.
Yeah.
If there's no more questions, one of the things that I've discovered going back to confidence points, with this method, there's a really easy way to see all those failures, and that's through your survey details and only isolating those codes that are for the failures or 3-time failures. And you can very quickly use your arrow keys on your keyboard and just go up and down, and you can see the deltas on them. It moves you around. So just keep that in mind when you work with this. So
I'll show you. I think this is what you're talking about, right? So I have survey details brought up. If I want to see all my surface failures, as soon as I select one, it's going to highlight it and jump to it.
That is correct. And it also shows you your deltas if you have a bigger survey details to the right or move that column around. You can see the deltas in your survey details.
Get a little bit bigger. So, yeah, those are recorded as attribute pairs. So terrain model elevation and terrain model delta. So if you ever have a question of, you know, so the point elevation is 0.8, the terrain model is down at 0.4. That means the terrain model needs to come up 39.
Can you use the Explorer window to adjust the display and basically turn off all of the point features and then turn on only the 3-time failures for the natural? I think if it's, yeah, and then turn on only those. It doesn't affect the display?
It does.
Okay.
What
you've got the other field book open. Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
So I guess, I mean, this is all very good stuff. What we've got is you're always going to have your confidence points from your original data. Mm-hmm. And this might be a reason why if you have your confidence points as a separate CSV data file, maybe you do want to bring them in to do their own field book of just raw confidence points. And that's what I would name it, raw confidence points. Because then it's very easy to just turn off your whole field book and everything about it's going to quit displaying. And you wouldn't have to dig into the individual point features. In this case, basically I've turned off all of my field data. The terrain still displays because it's its own thing.
Chris Brown has his hand up as well.
Oh, okay. Oh, thanks. Yeah, Chris, question.
The trick I've learned on the templates is when you're doing your QC, say you need a narrow double, is you can just go and select the line and then go in the template and make the quick change. It works really well and really easy, saves free drawing. With this new system, do we want to create a iterative process, or do we want to not necessarily keep all the stuff and just post for final review the last set?
Okay, I assume you mean like when we're talking about the import of the process data, the process confidence points.
You process confidence reports.
I think the requirement would be, yes, the final one is the one that has to be in the file. But I'm trying to give everybody options, because if an analyst is processing something and the PLS wants to review all the steps that were done, then maybe they will want to see each iterative process with the confidence points. So I really think that needs to be on a discussion that's had in the office. What is your office policy going to be? How are you going to handle them? But I will say, I think all of the processed, the input and the output files do need to be retained, because that is showing where we found the corrections. And that's part of the confidence point process is, you either determine why it happened or you determine it's not valid, so you remove it.
Okay.
Anything else? We're a little over. I'm sorry for that, but I do like the questions. It's always good to discuss different options and see different things. All right, I guess we'll close it at that then. I think we're sticking with the plan. I think I'm doing next week's also. Next week, I'll pick up on those geometry basics and some of the geometry alignment import steps that we've learned, some of the tips and tricks, and some of the caveats, some of the warnings about how easily you can corrupt your civil data. So if you have any other questions, you can always send me or John an email. We're happy to help. And with that, I say thank you and have a good afternoon.